What have you found helpful in your years of helping people grow to maturity?
Small groups.
Small groups. Amen.
I don't know if you've heard that before.
I have heard that. I'm a soul on small groups.
One of the fun things about what happened was once we started really growing, we became one of the fastest growing churches in the country.
Yeah, and you're on that list.
You don't have the ability to have Sunday school anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to gather everybody on your place. So you have to adopt the original Acts 2 model and say, okay, let's get together, and then you guys go out. And really, honestly, purpose-driven life, the first time around was probably the first time we really emphasized
the
small
campaign
group
helped you
Absolutely.
Start small group.
Campaigns are gold.
Campaigns are small group factories. Now, in the New Testament, it talks about the twin structures of the church. They met in the temple courts and house to house. Temple courts, by the way, is plural. It's a misnomer to think they met in the temple. They didn't, because only priests got to go into the temple. They met in the courts, and if you've been to the temple courts around Solomon's temple, you could easily hold 50,000 people in those temple courts because they stood for worship. But then they met in the house to house. So large group worship, small group fellowship. And Saddleback, of course, is such a believer in small groups. We're the only church in America that has more people in groups than actually come on weekends. This weekend, we'll have maybe 26,000 people in church, but during the week, we'll have over 40,000 people in over 9,000 small groups. And that's why if I were to die right now, the church would keep growing because they're in these groups. And so that it keeps it from being personality driven.
You got to hope it does.
Yeah.
And I'm at the age, and you're well past that age, where we have to start thinking about what does happen to the church when we go by.
Exactly.
What happens to the church, later on.
Exactly.
And that's why this is so important. That's why figuring out how to keep the church on track and on mission is so important.
A guy asked me that yesterday. We were talking about succession, and I said, there is no success without a successor. But the successor often is not a person, it's a system. For instance, who was the successor to Martin Luther? Nobody. But he did leave a system called the Lutheran Church. Yeah. Who was the successor to John Calvin? Nobody. But he left a system called the Presbyterian Church. Who was the successor to John Wesley? Nobody. But he left a system called the Methodist Church. And when I die or when I move off the scene, we're leaving a system of building on the purposes of the church rather than on the personality of the pastor.